Now that Rod and I are back from vacation, we've been working at getting back into the rhythm of walking early in the mornings. And I've come to realize that for most of the year, we walk before it's light. We even come back before it's light many times. And so we have to give special attention to where we put our feet, where we step, because there are unexpected potholes, there are curbs and unevenness in the paths, and we just have to watch a little more carefully. And I've also noticed that I have this pain in my neck again as I walk. And I wonder where that came from. I think I figured it out. I think it happens because I'm tense and I'm looking down as I walk. It doesn't happen when it's daytime. So clearly it has something to do with the time of day I walk. There's something natural to looking up, quite literally. The text that Sue read, and she captured it perfectly in your comments too, Sue, it talks about looking up and seeing grandeur, seeing the beauty of the nighttime sky. Simply gazing up into the sky at nighttime shifts our attention. It shifts the notion of the place that we occupy in this world, even the place of our earth in this cosmos. Looking up and shifting our gaze, and thereby our attention, breathes new life and vigor into tedium and monotony. This, by the way, is the reason for days off and for vacation. We can take this metaphor a little bit further and say this is actually Sabbath, which is that regularly instituted time of rest. I've often said that road trips inspire me to think new thoughts. I have new ideas simply by being in a different place and having a different rhythm. It doesn't have to be a long road trip. Even driving up to Kings Canyon National Park is enough for that to happen. 2 nights from our vacation stand out in my mind, both of them from South Dakota. We found a camping site deep in the South Dakota countryside, far from even smallest towns. And we could gaze up into the sky where there were millions of stars, and we saw the Milky Way. We realized we hadn't seen that in decades. Now I know it's kind of dark, and from here I can see a few specks. There were millions. We don't happen to have a high-end camera and tripod and time exposure and all of that, but it gives you an idea. The nighttime sky inspiring something new and amazing. We had dreamed that this would happen, and it did, in this place where there is zero light pollution. When I look up at your skies, at what your fingers made, the moon and the stars that you set firmly in place, what are human beings that you think about them? Just by observing the moon and the stars in the nighttime sky was enough to prompt this psalmist to reflect. What are human beings that you, God, pay attention to us? It's a good practice to shift our gaze often. Some years ago, I had a colleague who regularly said, "Look far," meaning don't only stare into the computer screen. Actually get up out of your chair, walk to the window, and look out. Give your shoulders, your eyes, your mind a break and look far. Shifting our gaze is critical even while driving, if you haven't noticed. If you become fixated on one place in the road, you'll start to doze off. And as we move our eyes, we see things that we don't always see. We're connected with all manner of sights. Sights in the North Dakota Badlands. Juniper berries. It's too bad it's kind of light in here. And of course, bison. We saw them too. Now, looking up is a good analogy for becoming consciously more aware. And what I'm not doing with turning our focus into figuratively thinking about looking up, I'm not trying to encourage a perpetually sunny or positive outlook. I'm encouraging us to change lenses from micro to wide angle, from portrait mode to panorama. Change it up a little. We're intricate beings. There's a connection between our spiritual longings, our intellectual curiosity, our emotional perspectives, even our physical health, and how simply being in another space fosters significant insight and well-being. And I was happy to hear that from Erebus and Rossi and Chad this morning too. Changing physical surroundings can just change up that rhythm. So let me give you a couple of examples. Let's look up physically. So what does that mean? Take the opportunity to explore. Maybe you like to hike. Maybe you walk. Maybe you stroll. Even things like eating differently. Becoming more conscious of how you walk. I'll use this word with some reservation, but I'll use the word alignment, and I'm not trying to get all alternative medicine-y on you here, but alignment has to do with breathing deeply, developing better balance, increasing our strength, becoming more mindful, just being conscious. Let's look up intellectually. It's a matter of cultivating curiosity, imagination, choosing our input intentionally. The books we read, the conversations we invite, the movies we choose, the museums we take in, how much social media we consume. And then it's also an invitation to look up mentally. As we look up, we take in new experiences from the Utah topography, that's Zion National Park, the Great Salt Flats, which is basically just a big white place. Quite amazing if you haven't seen it. And then there are some just random shots on some back roads, also in Utah. And then we look at the vastness of the plains or the prairies. You have the hay bales. We have a storm coming in over the South Dakota meadow and an expansive grain field. Now, incidentally, that right there is where my 1st through 6th grade one-room school stood. And there's nothing left except that, the grain field. Then something else, same area, but a beautiful park. That's all right. It's all about flexibility. And when we went through all of these different landscapes, I thought about the indigenous people who've always known how to live on this land. We don't. We fear wildfires, we fear floods, climate change. But I thought about the indigenous people. I thought about the massive investment of the human spirit needed to infuse justice into this nation and around the globe, as Elizabeth led us in this morning. And so let's also look up emotionally. Looking up emotionally requires an open spirit. Listening to our own heart, our own feelings. What comes up for us as we observe things in various spaces? We might be in familiar or in unfamiliar people groupings. What does that raise for us? Do you observe people at the checkout in the grocery store? Do you listen to people tell their own stories of joy and pain? How about laughing until your belly hurts? That does a heart good. All of that is an invitation to get in touch with what my inner reality really is. Am I afraid? Am I angry? And if I'm angry, what am I angry about? Where does that anger come from? Am I rational or irrational? And what is that anyway? And who's really to know? I'm amazed at how much I learn about myself and about others simply by listening to them, to myself. And let's look up spiritually. Now that may be something different than you might think. It's hard to differentiate between all these various categories of who we are as people. And in my estimation, all of this flows together into the spiritual experience river, so to speak. I found the spiritual experiences of the journey to be transformative. And no, I did not attend one church service in 3 weeks. I did not have any outwardly religious experiences, but I did have profoundly spiritual experiences. There were and there are 3 books, either completed or in progress. One is called Holy Ground, a book compiled by Dora Duick, which contains stories of 15 women in church leadership in the denomination of my childhood, where women cannot be ordained. Second one is Bittersweet, Susan Cain's exploration of authenticity, and she talks about how toxic positivity has reduced much of our culture to anxiety and superficiality. And thirdly, Fountains of Silence, a historical novel set in Spain during Franco's dictatorship, written by Ruta Sepetys. Now, all 3 of these are powerful reads, but they're very different one from the other. And then there was music. We watched a captivating Berlin Philharmonic concert of Schumann's Cello Concerto featuring cellist Johannes Moser. Johannes is the son of friends of ours in Germany. He was a teenager when we were there, and he's now an internationally renowned cellist. Wow. And then I attended a concert featuring string players performing Telemann, Dvorak, Mendelssohn. You can't read that, but that's the playbill. The one movie that we saw that stands out in my mind is entitled Van Gogh, of Wheat Fields and Clouded Skies, a documentary offering a new look at this distinguished Dutch painter through the legacy left by the largest private collector, Helene Krüller-Müller, and exhibited in a museum deep in the forest near Otterlo, Netherlands. I want to get there someday. And then there was the Human Rights Museum, the Canadian Human Rights Museum. That's the building outside. It's an extensive collection featuring vast art and communication forms telling the story of the fight for human rights and dignity in Canada and around the globe. That place is nothing short of a sacred space. The walkways from one level to another are just amazing. It's hard to see what they are, but these, the railings, so to speak, are made of alabaster. It's just stunning in real life. And here's one inscription of thousands written by a youth activist displayed on the wall, and you can read it for yourself. So if one, you probably can't see past here, can you? Yeah. If one intentionally looks up, new impressions and the capacity to experience God are limitless. In fact, it's transforming. Ellie Choate, professional harpist and daughter of Gretchen, whom we honored at a memorial service yesterday afternoon, told me this story. To play the harp, the musician has to always look ahead to the upcoming notes rather than at the hands where they're playing right at the moment. She likens it to learning to ride a bike. If the bicyclist looks down at the ground right in front of the wheel, the bicycle falls over. But the bicyclist needs to look at the road ahead, and then the wheels are firm, the way is steady. The key is looking up. Before we left on vacation, Sarah Fye suggested that I think about the sermon for this morning more of a reflection on the road or from the road. And I took her challenge. This is my attempt at doing that, Sarah. It was a good exercise for me to think back and just to reflect on what that really was. Every time we start a new day, we are handed opportunities. We're handed opportunities to look up, to see things differently, to come at it from a different angle. And one doesn't have to travel thousands of miles to have that experience. Every day offers that, if we look up, both figuratively and literally. If we look up to observe, to listen, to slow down, to touch, smell, ponder, see. Take a deep breath and look at the sky. What are human beings that God pays attention to us? And yet, God pays close attention. There is so much more to say about Psalm 8, especially as you read it, Sue. I realized that yet again, but that's for another date and another place.